South Carolinian.
The only one I know from Tennessee is, listen closely, born on the mountaintop of Tennessee, greatest man you ever did see. Killed a bear when he was only 3. Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier. That's all I know from Tennessee.
The audience is probably wondering what they walked themselves into.
Well,
good afternoon, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Freethinkers Forum. This is episode 75, and we're joined by a repeat guest, a very special guest. His name is Norman Finkelstein, and he got his degree, his PhD from Princeton University, out of the politics department, author of several books. We may briefly touch on a few of them today. It's going to be more of a Q&A today, but author of several books, Holocaust Industry, Gaza, which we're going to discuss a little bit today, I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get to It, Method and Madness, just so many different books, The Rise and Fall of Palestine. Our audience just want to say welcome back to the show and thanks for coming back to Kiko's Freethinkers Forum.
Well, I'm really happy to be back. I do many interviews and I get my mind gets numb doing them. But then when I hear your voice, that so friendly Southern drawl,
oh gosh,
I get into a different state of mind.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good to know.
Nirvana.
Okay. I hope that's a good thing. Yeah, that's crazy because you pointed it out, and a lot of people think I have a different accent. I have a Kikoism, but we'll just keep it at that right now. I just wanted to say thanks to my audience. We've reached 104 different countries. This is really an international community platform, and that's what I always envisioned it to be. So I want to say thanks to everyone that contributes to the forum, even if it's just a view here and there. We do say subscribe for free on our official YouTube channel. It doesn't cost you a thing. We're not asking for a dime, just a little bit of your time and to expand your mind. And remember, you can't unthink free thought. And that's what we would like to say here. You're not going to agree with everything that we say, but just always try to keep an open mind and let's keep those communication lines together. Before I brought Norm back on, I was thinking about, I read Holocaust Industry. That was the first book I read of his, I think. And I can't help but see the connections between the Holocaust Industry and I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get to It. Because you have one that has more of a collective focus when you talk about this whole drubbing up of anti-Semitism from these different brokers in the game, and basically manufacturing some kind of opposition to people who would speak out against Israel, but there's always that threat of being tagged anti-Semitic. You have these different organizations, AIPAC, and you have the Southern Poverty Law Center. You have different organizations that the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, to kind of have these agendas because the media colludes with those agendas that are very pro-Israel. And that's why I kind of learned reading his book, The Holocaust Industry, and then you go fast forward 20 years later to I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get to It, and you see an attack towards certain individuals perpetuating this, the woke politics that Finkelstein describes. This similar capture that you see with the Holocaust Industry. And Ta-Nehisi Coates uses the reparations argument as a precedent. Well, the Jews got reparations. I mean, what about African Americans? But maybe not in a serious way. It became almost a radical chic, as Professor Finkelstein talks about. And so before I brought him on, I was wanting to discuss how I Burn That Bridge more so. That was originally what I wanted to reach out to him about. But I would have to mention Gaza. That's all that's on my mind right now. And so I read his book. I bought his book, Gaza. And it's a dense book. And it made me think of my own program in Latin America about this whole idea of civilization and barbarism, these dichotomies, these dualities that are thrown in our faces by the media. And they're not innocent dichotomies. They're thrown there for a reason to make people consider, second guess themselves. We lose track of our own humanity. And I want the audience to keep that in mind, that this is a human crisis that's going on. All this pro-Palestine, pro-Israel, these are people getting slaughtered as we speak. And that's all I could think of was a book by a gentleman. His name was Domingo Sarmiento in 1845, entitled Facundo, Civilización y Barbarie, which goes back into the whole idea of barbarism, civilization. This is not a new concept. It's common in Latin America. It was used towards the indigenous populations in Latin America, towards Black people. And this is no exception with what's going on now in the current conflict in Gaza, just the bombardment of the Israeli Defense Forces towards Gaza. But I wanted to open it up to Professor Finkelstein and ask him some questions that I had on my mind. This whole idea of Hamas, I want to clear that up. You have Hamas and then you have the Fatah parties, correct? But you always hear about Hamas in the news, Hamas this, Hamas that. What exactly is Hamas for the audience, to clear that up?
Hamas is a political party. Hamas is a military organization. Hamas is a competing faction in Palestinian politics. But at some point, I think, in my opinion, this obsessive focus on Hamas becomes a distraction, because it becomes a distraction from the fact of what created the organization and what created the state of mind that caused approximately 2,000 young men from Gaza to break through the gates of Gaza concentration camp and commit what has to be called a very large atrocity. About that, there can be no doubt. And so I think one has to turn one's focus away from Hamas and focus on the people who either joined Hamas or executed its policies on October 7th. So let me just give you a simple analogy, and I'm going to ask your forgiveness and the forbearance of your listeners. I'm very, very tired right now, and I'm just completely swamped and overwhelmed with inquiries and interviews, and I think the world of you, and that's the honest truth. And I'll be happy at another time to come back and to answer all your questions, not just those dealing with Gaza. In any event, let's take a simple comparison. As you know, in the history of the United States, there were many slave rebellions before the Civil War. And the most famous of the slave rebellions, or the largest, was the Nat Turner slave rebellion. Now, the Nat Turner slave, first of all, let's just establish, like Hamas, Nat Turner was a religious fanatic. There's no question about that. He apparently had, to quote one of his biographers, he had a prodigious knowledge of the Bible, memorized large parts of it, and his whole worldview was mediated by the Bible. So, like Hamas, he's a religious fanatic or a religious zealot. Number two, Nat Turner was an extremely smart guy. He was not some crazed fellow off the street. He was very well educated. He did read. I mean, many slaves couldn't read, but he did read. Actually, after the Nat Turner Rebellion, a law was passed to forbid the slaves to read. It was because of that rebellion, because of Nat Turner. So he was very well educated. And when the rebellion carried out, it was like what happened in Israel on October 7th. They killed men, they killed women, they killed children. We have to be honest about those things. Nat Turner and his supporters, they beheaded babies. That's a fact. They axed, pulverized the skulls of white people, and it was completely random. The order given out by Nat Turner was kill all the whites. That was his order. Now, when the rebellion was put down, it was put down very brutally. They killed about 120 blacks randomly, severed their heads and put their heads on poles to warn other black people, this is what's going to happen to you if you rebel. The point is, when the rebellion was finally repressed, the abolitionists, the white abolitionists, people like William Lloyd Garrison, Thaddeus Stevens, Wendell Phillips, Charles Sumner, they were blamed for the rebellion. They were blamed for the rebellion. It's because of what you're saying that slavery is wrong and so on and so forth. You caused the rebellion. And William Lloyd Garrison, he was the editor of a newspaper called The Liberator. William Lloyd Garrison said, we didn't cause the rebellion. It was slavery that caused the rebellion. It was how you treat these people that caused rebellion. It's because you degrade them, you humiliate them, you lacerate them. That's what caused the rebellion. Don't try to blame us for it. And the same way, I think that's in large part, that's true of what happened on October 7th. You have to look at the as I said, approximately 2,000 Hamas members who burst through the gate and carried on like Nat Turner. That's just a fact. Nat Turner and his supporters. By the way, just as a historical note, Nat Turner was apparently the most restrained. He only killed one person. That's just a historical footnote. Why he only killed one person, we don't know really. It's not clear. But he never tried to hide anything he did. He did have a trial, and he spoke exactly the facts. And so if he said he killed only one person, I tend to believe it because he didn't care. He had no reason to lie at that point. It was clear he was going to be executed. So, in my opinion, the question is not Hamas, but or any more than it was, what did the abolitionists do? It's trying to understand the people who carried on that execution. And there, I think the answer is not so hard to find. And I'm going to just lay out some basic facts to try to situate what happened. Beginning in 2006, a brutal blockade was imposed on Gaza. Now, what is Gaza? Gaza is about 25 miles long and 5 miles wide. So since I like to jog, or used to, now it's hard for me, but I used to. For me, in my mind, what does 25 miles long mean? Well, it means its length is less than a marathon. A marathon is 26.2 miles. Its width is 5 miles. So I jog along the Coney Island seashore every day, 5 miles. And I'm nearly 70 years old, so it's not such a great distance. And that's Gaza, 25 miles long, shorter than a marathon, 5 miles wide. It's a circumference of the Coney Island beach where I live in Brooklyn, seashore. Now, Gaza is among the most densely populated places on God's earth. It's more densely populated than Tokyo. There are about 2.2 million people in Gaza. 70% of the people in Gaza are refugees. That is to say, people who were expelled in 1948 from what became Israel and their descendants. It's a refugee population. Half of Gaza consists of children. A little more than 1 out of every 2 Gazans is a child. So you have among the most densely populated areas on Earth, and the population comprises 70% refugees, 50% children. Now, nobody can go into Gaza. Nobody can leave Gaza, with the rarest exception. There's occasionally an exception, but for 99.9% of the people of Gaza, nobody can go in, nobody can go out. The estimate is about half the population of Gaza is classified as suffering from severe food insecurity. About 50% of the population of Gaza is unemployed. Among youth, it's about 60%. So that's the situation. The British Conservative Prime Minister, David Cameron, he described Gaza as an open-air prison. Now, bear in mind who are the prisoners. One half of them are children. The Hebrew University sociologist Baruch Kimmerling, Jewish Israeli, he described Gaza as the largest concentration camp ever. But that's only half the story, because the other half of the story is periodically, every few years, Gaza launches what it calls its operations in Gaza. Operations are just a euphemism for high-tech massacres. The most cutting-edge technology on the planet is used, and I'll use the Israeli expression and this is the Israeli expression, so there's no confusion here, to mow the lawn in Gaza. That's what the Israelis call it, mowing the lawn. Now, it happens that half the blades on that lawn are children. That's what the people in Gaza have endured for the past 20 years. Now, the young men who burst through the gates of Gaza, almost certainly they were born in that concentration camp. They were probably 18 to 20, 22 years old. They were born or almost born. No, they were born in the concentration camp because they would never have left before 4 years old. So they had been immured, confined to a concentration camp for 20 years with no future, no past, and no present, and no prospect of anything except, like Nat Turner, being born into a condition that you will have to endure until your last dying day. Now, I mentioned to you that Nat Turner was a very smart guy. And one of his biographers, Stephen Oates, a very good historian, he said of Nat Turner that his rage, Turner's rage, sprang from, he called it the prodigious, which means huge, the prodigious chasm means gap, the prodigious chasm between Nat Turner's intelligence and aspirations on the one hand, and on the other hand, the fact that he would be a slave for the rest of his life. And from thence sprang the rage. And I think it's not far-fetched to believe, to speculate. It's not far-fetched to speculate. It was that same chasm between what these young men hoped to realize in life, like all of us. We all have hopes, we all have aspirations, between what they hoped to realize in life on the one hand, and the prodigious chasm between their hopes and aspirations and the reality that they were born into a concentration camp, they live in a concentration camp, and they will die in the concentration camp. So for me, I can't say, after reading about the slave rebellions, not just here, but also in Haiti and elsewhere, after reading about the slave rebellions, which were very gory, don't kid yourself, these weren't white gloves rebellions. Lots of white folks were slaughtered. It wasn't altogether a shock to me, this coming forth of the rage.
The struggling thing about, and I mentioned it earlier, just reading your book Gaza, is that you honestly is no different. The mindset, you talked about in the book, the different operations, Protective Edge. What was the Cast Lead was a big one. Operation Pillar, I think it was called
Pillar of Defense.
Pillar of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the detail that you described it with, and any casual person, to make this a simple description, if you don't even follow politics, if you read the book Gaza by Norm G. Finkelstein, you could be a casual sports fan or whatever, but you leave that book shrugging your shoulders like, what the hell is this about? Like, why is this allowed to happen? Why the double standards?
Totally agree. I'll just speak right now to the double standard. I'm going to have to get off, but I want to speak to the double standard. Because if you were to Google now, are you in front of a computer?
Yes, yes, I have a free computer over here.
Okay. If you were to Google now, Israel, just put in Israel, Israel, and then put in quotation marks the phrase mowing the lawn, MOWING, mowing the lawn.
You're saying quotations, mowing the lawn?
Yes, mowing the lawn. You'll probably get how many websites, just out of curiosity?
259,000 results.
259,000 results, okay? Now, as I said earlier, what does mowing the lawn mean? These high-tech massacres, killing thousands of people, including hundreds of children, all right? And that phrase is used casually. They don't hide the phrase. It's repeated all the time in the United States, mowing the lawn. Now imagine the reaction, because you are speaking to double standards. Imagine the reaction if someone were to say, but wait, what Hamas did on October 7th, it was just mowing the lawn like Israel. Can you imagine the reaction?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they were just mowing the lawn like Israel. Can you imagine the reaction? I mean, you would have to hire the National Guard to protect your apartment or your home.
Mm-hmm.
Can't say that. But Israel routinely uses the phrase. It's okay to mow the lawn when 1 million of those blades of grass are children, Palestinian children. But if you were to say that for Israelis,
Like in the parking lot. I mean, in Nikki Haley, we have people run for presidents regurgitating this stuff.
Because they're monsters. They're moral monsters. So, I think that's what happened on October 7th. The people in Gaza said, okay, now we're going to mow the lawn. Not nice, horrible, but one side doesn't get to go mow the lawn all the time. And I think there was a good line, I can't find it now. It said, Nat Turner was determined to murder the whites because slavery had murdered Black people, had murdered their souls, murdered their humanity, murdered their self-respect. You reap what you have sown.
Wow. Yeah, it's a sad, I have to admit, it was a sad read. And it's honestly, and I'm speaking specifically to Gaza. I mean, if you read Method of Madness, honestly, I see Gaza as almost just a detailed, broader extension of Method of Madness.
It was.
But it's almost like I've read fiction novels. That's what my background is in, is criticizing fiction. And I tell you, you couldn't even tell the difference between the two. Like reading what you were describing, you would
It is,
think there was something in a novel.
the horror is one thing, but on the top of the horror is the lies. The lies, the denial of what you're doing, the denial, and all of these respected, honored individuals in universities, in public life, denying the reality that's staring in your face of what's been done to this people. So it's like a kind of double sin, the sin of the actual commission of these horrific acts, and then to say it never happened. Hamas is making it all up. It's just Hamas propaganda. It didn't happen. You know, I once debated a Holocaust denier. My parents were in the Nazi Holocaust during World War II. And my parents' family on both sides was exterminated during the war, except for my mother and father. And she said, oh, they weren't killed. They're probably somewhere in Russia. You know, I turned to her and I said, her name was Lady Renouf. Lady, you know, she had the title, Lady Renouf, Renouf. I think it was Renouf. I said, you're a moron. You're a complete imbecile to make a statement like that, to insult the memory of the dead by pretending as if it didn't happen. They're somewhere in Russia. And that's what's done with Gaza. It's all Hamas. Hamas did it. Hamas both President Biden said it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I don't believe the numbers.
Of course.
He said it. I don't believe the numbers. If a German said that about the Nazi Holocaust, 5 to 6 million, they'll be called a Holocaust denier.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, I don't believe the numbers. The only thing I can say in his defense is he's brain dead. So you have to give him a pass. But assuming his brain is nimble, which it's not, even if saying it's marginally awake, which it's not, that's a Holocaust denier. I don't believe the numbers. You know. Okay, Mr. Jerry. So nice talking to you.
You too. To be continued, audience, just so y'all know, beautiful people. And just to give a plug-in to his books, I'm going to link everything in the episode description. I suggest reading Gaza, and I also suggest reading The Holocaust Industry. You can read one before the other, it doesn't matter, but I think it will give you a good initial context to what we're describing. Beautiful people, next week we have Jeffrey Summers to discuss the Soviet Union. And after that, we have lots of commentators, and we have a presidential forum in store for December. Enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.
Okay, I hope we meet in Target again to get matching trousers with our shirts.
Okay, we'll see each other soon.
Bye-bye.